Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke, and I'm an amateurish historian. And as always, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Yannicka, who is anything but. Happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate. If not, doesn't matter because it's still movie time. Let's go. We got a question from one of our patrons, Drekka's daughter, who says, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts about The Last Duel and especially ideas like rape culture in the Middle Ages compared to today. Hey, good news, Drekka's daughter. We got a whole episode for you. So, here we go. Content warning. The Last Duel centers upon a rape accusation and trial and contains frank depictions of the rape in question. And since we'll be talking about the movie in depth, we will be discussing rape, marital rape, and victim blaming and these sorts of things. We just want you to know up front. If that's not your kind of thing, you can turn off now.
Yep.
But otherwise...
Welcome to the show.
Otherwise, let's go. Director Ridley Scott is known for a great many things. He directed Blade Runner and Alien, two of the best sci-fi movies ever made. Also, The Martian is a lot of fun, too. He loves directing historical epics that take extreme liberties with historical accuracy in favor of utilizing the rule of cool, having done this at least 8 different times in his career. And he's currently fighting a running battle with the press and historians during the media blitz for his new film Napoleon due to so many apparent inaccuracies in the trailer alone. He's the king of releasing numerous revisions of his films, some of which are better by wide margins than the theatrical release. For better and worse, he's well known for big, bombastic action set pieces and battles in his movies, often focusing far more on these than dialogue, narrative cohesion, and connective tissue. Both Scott and his films are known for being intensely controversial. For the most part, you either love him or you hate him. You like his style or you loathe it. This varies depending on the viewer. He's long had a contentious relationship with historians, whom he loves to antagonize, and some film scholars believe him to be a fraud who's coasting off of 2 early career movies and little else. But what Ridley Scott's 2021 film, The Last Duel, posits is... What if Scott really didn't do any of those things this time? I mean, except for the controversy, he can't help that. The Last Duel eschews many of Scott's most well-known habits in favor of an intimate, Rashomon-inspired medieval soap opera told in 3 parts that hinges upon a complicated series of legal and contractual disputes. For a historical film from Ridley Scott, there are no outrageous departures from medieval history, and while I'm sure there are inaccuracies, there's certainly nothing on the level of Russell Crowe reestablishing the Roman Republic, or Robin Hood being the secret heir to the legacy of the Magna Carta decades before it was actually written and signed. There are lavish colors and food here, and accurate depictions of convoluted medieval manorial customs and jealous idiot knights. And while the spectacle of the titular final duel is pure Scott, it only comes after you get through 3 different versions of events, in some cases, and a harrowing rape trial. Matt Damon does some brief fight sequences from various 100 Years' War battles in between, but that mostly serves to just give him more facial scarring as time goes on. But it just wouldn't be Ridley without controversy, which he achieved by portraying how a medieval rape accusation against a pillar of the community threatens the life of the victim and her child, and then showing the truth of what happened through the eyes of both the rapist and the victim. So let's talk The Last Duel. Eleanor, before we get into it, what did you think, just personally, of the movie?
I think I like it.
Yeah, I do too. I liked it a lot. I was I was like, wow, I like this a lot more than I thought.
You know what? I'm going to be so real with you because I hated the trailer. I was ready to go into this and be like, well, I guess I'm going to hate this shit. And I really actually quite liked it. I like the Rashomon-ing of it because I think that this is a very good and effective way to talk about rape culture, actually.
Yes.
And so I thought that it is actually a really interesting and nuanced movie about sexual assault and the cultures which enable it. So yeah, I think I like it.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
I was really shocked because like I remembered the rape stuff and I was like expecting like we'll get into the whole thing, but I was expecting for it to be like that for the whole moral of the thing to be like, well, the woman was raped, but she shouldn't have made such a big deal about, or something like that. And it was like, no, it handles it. I mean, as well as a thing like that can be handled, it handles it really well, and I think shows like in this instance, like we aren't so different in a very bad way because we still do the same things, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into it. I by the way, I am very happy that you liked it because I was watching this thing and I was like, I really like this.
Yeah.
And I think Eleanor's gonna like it too.
I
was like,
yeah, I did.
And I was like, oh man, I really hope. I really hope she likes it
Because otherwise it's just going to be an hour of us fighting.
Well, I mean, like, we can do that sometime.
Yeah.
Like, we can do Kingdom of Heaven, and I could just be like, yes, all of your complaints about Kingdom of Heaven are right. However, have we considered that I like it? That I like the extended edition? The theatrical version's crap. But
I haven't seen the extended edition. So maybe that's the problem.
I don't know that it's going to solve everything, but I do think it makes the movie much better as a film.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Before we get to talking about it, so like as putting on your dour historian hat here, how did you feel about it? Are there any really bad inaccuracies that you noticed, and conversely, anything that the movie does well you'd like to compliment?
Okay, so the answer is yes on both accounts, and therein lies the rub with Ridley Scott's historical movies.
Yes.
Okay, because he gets enough things right, whilst also going, it's based on a historical event.
Yeah.
Then when he gets things wrong, it becomes dangerous to an extent. And I've kind of been talking about this on Blue Sky this week, where it's like, I actually prefer, like, I would prefer if he just went, like, shut up, lol. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of annoyed with him on this Napoleon thing, because he's like, well, I say to historians, were you there? And I'm like, homie, you don't have to pick a fight with us. If people go, oh, well, pyramids, like, Napoleon didn't shoot at the pyramids, just go, haha, I know, but it fucks so hard. And, like, that's the correct answer, because, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, stop being a little nerd. If he says, yeah, I know, I just thought it was cool. Right?
Yeah.
And the frustrating thing is he gets a lot of things correct. Okay, so, like, here's an example of the frustration, right?
Okay.
There's the scene where Marguerite is seeing the physician about why she can't get pregnant. They do a couple of things exactly right. They've got the urine vase. He's inspecting her urine. He's holding a urine wheel. I was like, I'm delighted. I love this.
Yeah.
I thought it was very funny how he's like, you have an imbalance of the four humors. I'm like, she knows what the four humors are, motherfucker. Like, you don't have to. You would just say,
you don't have to dumb it down for her dog.
Like,
come on.
She's medieval, fine. And like that was all fine, and I was delighted. And then she goes, but doctor, and I'm like, he's not a doctor. He's a physician. he's not a doctor. Yeah. Physicians will not be called doctors for hundreds of years. He does, unless this motherfucker has been to the University of Paris and like completed the several liberal arts. He's not a doctor, and so it's stuff like that. Where the people wear good colors and things like that, but the walls in the castles are all stone. And also it takes place in a Middle Ages where the sun never shines except in the winter. While it's little things like that where you're like, and. That this is the danger, right? Is that some of the things are really deft and nicely done, and then they're like eating off china plates at a party, and I'm like, I'll fucking kill you all, like it just, And that's just a stupid little throwaway thing, but I'm just like I've got all through it. I'm like, that's nice, boo. That's not boo.
I was watching it, and from the stuff you described, I was very I was very taken aback by the open how much this turns into almost like a legal procedural, even before we get to the actual trial, the rape trial at the end, how it's a legal procedural about like this kind of disputed little piece of land that changes hands, and like you see Jean de Carouge's like attempts to go around his vassal lord to appeal right to the king, and I was like, I mean, I can't tell you that this stuff is 100% accurate, but it seems to mirror like the stuff that we've talked about generally on the show, and like I was like, damn, Ridley.
Yeah, like I liked that.
Damn, man. Like it's good. Like it's well done.
Yeah, and I think that they do a good job of kind of like showing actually how a lot of judicial rulings are made, which they tend to stay within, you know, the area or duchy or whatever that's going on, and it takes like special cases to go up to the king, and you can only do that if you're a noble, you know, which they show really well. And, you know, it also shows the trouble with this, which is like, yeah, well, are you in good?
Yeah.
Because there's absolutely no way that, like, you know, your word will be taken over someone else's. So I thought that was quite nice, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I liked it. You know, I knew there was going to be some stuff in there, but like overall I'm just surprised. Yeah. Let's get into it. We could talk about it more, but really surprised how well all of this ends up being handled, and I love Adam Driver. He's great.
He was so unpleasant.
Also wild that he plays an evil knight in two movies that do the Rashomon inspired thing, The Last Jedi, which is a Star Wars movie, and then this, like, same thing.
And they're
like,
really different evil knights too.
Yes.
So, like,
yes.
Shout out to him as an actor, like, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So we're going to get into it. As I said, The Last Duel is inspired by and done in the style of Akira Kurosawa's masterpiece, Rashomon, wherein the truth of what happened is portrayed from 3 different points of view, and the viewer is largely left to decide whose version is right. In this case, we see the truth according to 3 shifting protagonists: Matt Damon's character, Sir Jean de Carouge, Adam Driver's Jacques Legris, and Jodie Krumer's Marguerite de Carouge. The first segment is the longest and contains the broad outlines of the narrative, and then each subsequent segment adds additional details, but also shows some events from a new point of view that either contrast with or downright contradict the previous versions. So in my mind, an event that is only shown once or does not have a contradictory scene is what we'll call, I guess, the quote-unquote true version of what happened. I'm saying all this because it's hard as hell to describe a film that's told in 3 interlocking contradictory versions, but we're going to try our best to follow the structure that the film uses. The very basic structure you need to know right now is this. The Last Duel takes place over a 16-year period from 1370 to 1386 in France during the Caroline phase of the 100 Years' War between England and France, and this is when France was doing a bit better than they had been after Poitiers and all that. So yeah, basically, yeah, as Eleanor said, it starts with the based on a true story thing, which lol, doubt, but you know, there's stuff there. There's stuff there, and we start, you know, as a lot of good stories do, at the very end. The titular duel is starting. They, you know, they get on horses. They're gonna do the joust first, and then continue on to the combat on foot if need be. Squires ready the knights. Helpers, you know, get everything together. Give them lances and shields. And the joust begins, and then we immediately jump back in time, and each of the sections is differentiated with a title card that says the truth according to X. And so this one is the truth according to Sir Jean de Carouge. And this is Matt Damon's character, who just has like
a nasty mullet.
a mullet, a neck beard, like a literal neck beard, like and like dirty blonde hair.
He's dirty a lot. I'm like, why is my man's face dirty? Like, it's confusing how often he's just a filth pig.
And he get like, I mean, I think, they're just doing it to show that he's like a boorish, uncouth whatever, and he's kind of a lout and everything. But like, his facial scarring like gets like so noticeably worse. Like towards the end, he has like this huge like pock mark in the side of his cheek, and like it's well done. It's not bad or anything, but it's just like, he's always just riding back in like on horseback from whatever latest like shitty battle that he fought in, and coming back with more scars, and is just like, well, I'm here. Okay, I look like Pigpen from from Charlie Brown for some reason. There's like a dust cloud following me, but yeah, we get introduced to Jean, and he's fighting alongside his bestest buddy, and that is Adam Driver's Jacques Legris. And they are kitted out in their finest gear, and they're getting towards the tail end of the Battle of Limoges, which we talked about in our 100 Years' War series. And this is, I believe, a not true accounting of what happened, but basically the dastardly English execute a bunch of French prisoners of war in sight of the army, and the army was ordered to hold the line at all costs in order to preserve the city of Limoges. But Matt Damon, being the meathead dumbass that he is, sees it and is like, sees them get executed, and is like, no, we must have vengeance, and rides out, and they're all for the king, and they ride out, and there's a big fight in the water. Damon is unhorsed immediately. Adam Driver saves his life. He saves Adam Driver's life. It's just like there's a lot of there's like actual hand-to-hand fighting in it.
Yeah.
They lose their swords, and I thought that was really cool because I imagine that probably happened a whole fucking lot. Yeah. So yeah, it just, I mean, it starts out, you got your typical Ridley Scott, kind of segment. You got a little battle here. Afterwards, everybody's bloody. There's some talk, blah, blah, blah. But, standard fare. And then, it's revealed later that Damon actually explicitly ignored the orders of Philippe, who is the vassal lord to him and Jacques and everyone else. And that's Ben Affleck, who is just has, man, he has like bangs that he cut himself. And like his like platinum blonde hair is just so like, it seems so out of place, and like I'm sure people did have platinum blonde hair, that's fine, but like it just seems so fucking weird.
I mean, it's very rude, although I like it because you do look like a medieval drawing or something. Yes.
Like
so I thought that was really nice, but it does look silly as hell. Like it just looks goofy.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I make fun of like the neck beard on Damon, but he looks like a medieval drawing of a person.
Oh yeah.
He has a neck beard. His chin hair is slightly longer. He's got like a weird mullet. Like it. Yeah,
like the mullet. When I first saw it, I was like mullet, and then like no, that's real. Turns out. Yeah, that shit's real. So.
Yeah. So yeah, we fast forward from there 7 years. And Damon and Jean de Carouge and Jacques Legris are both squires at this time, and 7 years later they pledge their service personally to Pierre, and you could tell there's tension, that Pierre and Jean don't like each other very much, and Adam Driver's there to like mediate between them so they don't so they don't fight each other too much. Yeah, and so I did have a question. Like, they're squires. Like, and Adam Driver's character is considered a squire throughout, even though he seems to be like in his 30s or 40s. Is like, I don't know. I guess I assumed that like squire was like a title you left behind. Well, like that was a title for like kids or like younger people, I guess.
So the thing is, squire can be a title for younger people, and squire can indicate that, for example, you're in service to a knight and you do things like do up his armor. But squire is also, esquire, which means that you are in possession of land. So you are in
Okay.
possession of land, and it might mean, for example, that your father is a lesser noble and he's not dead yet, right? So
Gotcha.
you're just
I
kind of like
gotcha.
waiting. You're waiting to be Sir
Okay. I
because
got you.
he's
That makes
alive.
sense.
Yeah. And so it is
Yeah.
confusing because then we kind of only have one word in English for it, but it would be more
Yeah.
apparent in situ and in context,
Yeah. And then we skip forward a little more. Jacques shows up at Jean's castle, and he's like, "Look, I gotta collect the rents that are due." And this is where we kind of start to find out that, in addition to being kind of boorish and an oaf and all that, Jean de Carouge is not good with money. He's not good with management of his peasants or serfs. I don't know which one specifically.
A little bit of both, probably.
Yep, probably. Yep. He's just not good with any of it. He's not good with the books. He's not good with even going and asking his servant or his serfs for the taxes that they owe. And
King shit, to be honest, but
yeah,
we'll keep it
yeah.
up.
Unfortunately, he's not really doing it because of any revolutionary spirit. It's more just like he's really dumb.
He's just
like,
stupid. Yeah, yeah.
The movie is very clear that like Jean de Carouge for like the bravery and
Well, bravery is stupidity a lot of the time.
yeah, the bravery that he has is stupidity, and like most of his problems are caused by like his inability to just be like, oh, I need to swallow my pride about
Yeah.
this, smile, make nice with everyone, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, like
And it's like
he
oh,
lacks.
go ahead.
Yeah, he lacks the refined sensibilities that an ideal noble would have. And I think what's interesting here is they're kind of they set Jean up like in opposition to Jacques, as it's like they're two poles of what a noble person might be, right?
Yeah,
So and
yeah,
Matt Damon
yeah,
is
exactly.
all the way violence, which is absolutely necessary for the upkeep of the kingdom or of, like whatever else have you, and especially during the 100 Years' War, obviously. But there's also this kind of expected, level of refinement. Like much is made of the fact that he is, for example, illiterate.
Yes,
And
yeah.
that would be odd. I was
Yeah.
like, really? Because, like it would be really, really weird to have a fully illiterate knight.
Yeah.
Very specifically because, well, how the fuck are you going to get your rent, homie?
Yeah, I did think about that, and I'll be honest, I just kind of chalked it up to like Ridley Scott wanting to go like all in
Yeah.
on the he's a moron. Like we're there's not going to be any of this like kind of he can secretly bespoke read kind of thing like what happens with Jacques and Marguerite later, but like Jean is just like no, he's dumb as
Yeah.
his brain does not
Function.
appropriately. And maybe he has CTE because he's been hit on the head too many times.
Real talk, yeah.
Wearing a helmet. I'm not really kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it just keeps going forward. Damon says to Jacques, he says, look, my wife and kid, my wife and kid died in the plague, as a bout of plague ran through. Our peasants have been hounded from the land either by war, plague, or something else. Everything is down across the board.
Yeah.
And basically, Jacques is like, okay, I will tell Pierre about all this. I will smooth it over because me and Pierre are friends. But you got to give me a little bit of what, you got to give me a little bit of something. So Jean goes to like scrounge that up, and then we see him immediately be like, well, I got to leave and go be a mercenary and fight some battles because, well, not technically a mercenary, but I got to go leave and fight some battles because I ain't got any money. He's got to go to Normandy, and then we get, another one of the little battle sequences. He's just adding more scars,
Yep.
more.
Yep.
And then you get there's a victory party at the castle, and everybody's kind of celebrating. And this is where we get Jean de Carouge is going to meet Marguerite because Marguerite is the daughter of this guy who, this noble who is who is disgraced because he backed the English after Poitiers. or during Poitiers, but then was later pardoned by the king. And there's a lot of like there's a lot of just like weird medieval like back and forth going on in this movie. Like, oh well, where are his loyalties? And people are like, they actively dislike this guy because like he's a traitor and everything. And like, even like when Matt Damon is like, oh, his daughter's so hot, when the dad shows up and to talk to them, he's like, he's really annoyed and kind of short with the father because like he's a traitor. And it's like, dude, you just gotta like be nice to this guy once, smooth everything over. You probably won't have to haggle about the dowry as much, and you'd be good to go. But he can't do that. Like, it's just constitutionally incapable of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think it's so funny, like, because basically you're just, it just sets up that anytime there's going to be like a decision tree, we're kind of like making the wrong decision, but for weird reasons, right?
Yes.
And that's why I like it, where you're like, you think you know where they're going with this, but it's like, like,
no. Yeah, like, there's a lot of stuff where this could have taken, like, what I would consider, like, the easy way out. And it's like, no. We're not going the easy way out. We're going through this Byzantine structure of how, like, realistically how medieval land disputes were done and why you would get people challenging people to duels and stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, and on the one hand you're kind of like, yeah, Matt Damon, even if he is a moron, he's right, like all of this is like ridiculous and stupid. But on the other hand, it's like, you catch more flies with honey, man.
Yeah, and it's like,
tell you,
it's just it's funny because it's kind of leaning into the you're not wrong, you're just an asshole thing, which is a very important one, I think. And I find that so interesting because he usually is in, what I would call the generalized right with everything, where it's like, where there are codes of conduct and there are good reasons, to expect things. But like, homie, you don't go in and call someone a cunt and then ask for that, right? And that's kind of the deal.
Even when he is defending his wife's honor later, in like, I mean, literally defending her honor to the death, because if he dies, she will be killed and their child will be orphaned. Even when he does that, he's doing it for the wrong
I know, it's
reasons,
like,
but we'll get to
sorry, I'm just like, whoa, but anyway.
No, I'm trying to get through this because
we gotta do
this whole rape trial and everything.
We gotta do
it.
Yeah.
I want to give you plenty of time to like break this down because I'm extremely interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we gotta go. We gotta go.
Yeah. So like, next scene we get, and Damon is haggling with Marguerite's father over this piece of land called, I believe, Anu les Faucons, something like that. And it's basically like described as just this small tract of land, but it's the wealthiest one that they have in the family. And Damon is basically like kind of a dick about it, insists on everything, and is very like, he's like, but I can't part with that. And Damon's like, well, I'm not doing it if you're not part. Like, dude, like this, like you don't have a lot to stand on here. You don't have money, you have a name, and that's about it. And they make a big point of that later. Like, he just doesn't have that much, and he's still just haggling, and they make a whole thing about it. But little does he know that in the background, that land is actually been given to Jacques Legris by Pierre for reasons we will discuss in a minute. But in this case, Jean Legris did nothing wrong because like he didn't like go behind Descarouges's back to like get the land. It just happened to be given to him by Pierre because Pierre was being a dick, but that's beside the point. And so it's one of those things, and like they start out with this enmity, but there's one thing here that is clear, and it's that Matt Damon never actually took legal ownership or title because of this land because Marguerite's father's ownership claim was revoked prior to the marriage, so what was given in the dowry wasn't his to give in the first place.
Right.
And this is key because in this respect, Jacques Legree is completely in the right according to their laws, and Jean is just like, that's just the way it is, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just kind of...
That's like, yeah, sorry about it. You thought that you were going to get something. You're not. Don't know what to tell you, Holmes. Like...
Yeah. And of course, De Carouge is just like furious about this. He's pissed, but instead of like sucking it up and being like, okay, like I got to get by, I got to live. Jacques Legree has basically been my closest and kind of only friend for a long time. And he just does it. And so he's like, okay, instead of because if he appealed to Pierre, he would obviously lose because Pierre was the one who gave away the land in the first place. So he's like, I'm going to appeal to the king, which he does, and is immediately denied. And of course, this really pisses off Pierre, who is like, what the fuck? And because of this, he takes the captaincy of a castle called Belém from Carouge's father, who's still alive, and the father is still still has it. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think like the father is like on death's door.
Yes,
is basically the thing, because then the dad ends up dying, and then they're like, also, P.S. Your mom has to leave because this isn't your castle anymore. So.
Yeah, so basically, like, Pierre gave the title to Jacques Legree, who can't turn it down because he's, like, basically an orphan and has only gotten here because he learned a bunch of stuff in seminary. I don't think it wasn't called seminary then, but you get the idea. He was getting taught to be a priest, and he stopped, but he learned a lot along the way, and so he takes it, and Matt Damon finds out that it's been taken, and his mom, even Damon's mom, is like, why did you go fight? Why did you go to the king?
Like, that's
fucking
idiot. You moron. Like, this is stupid. Your interpersonal relationships are at play. Christ.
Yeah, he gives it away. Damon shows up, insults everyone, makes a huge deal, like, calls everyone assholes, fuck you, you're cool, fuck you, the whole thing. Yeah. He's, and he comes back to Marguerite, and they've married by this time, and he's like, we're no longer welcome at court or anything. It's it's bad, and it's like, okay, man. And she's just like,
bro,
like, you could, like, even at this early point, like, before you figure, you understand how learned she is and how much of an inner universe and everything she has, interiority, you could still see her being like, oh fuck, what have I gotten into?
Yeah.
God, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? And so a year later, there is a party, and much of this centers around what happens at this party for a man named Crespin, who invites Jean de Carouge and Marguerite to the party, and Jacques Legree is also invited, and he decides to go because he still wants to smooth things over with de Carouge because, as he says, I used to be the godfather to his son. And, the vassals of the Lord don't need to be fighting, which is true. I mean,
that's
it's
true.
true.
Yeah.
Jacques Legree to me is like the most consummate, like,
Lord,
medieval European bureaucratic professional you could kind of have. He's just like, no, we have to do this for the realm. Like, I don't give a shit. And they make up. It's very cool. They make up, but you can tell there are kind of eyes between Marguerite and Jacques Legree, but we'll get back to that later when we get to their points of view. So Carouge basically is like, look, I got to go off to war again because we don't have any money, blah, blah, blah. I'll come back. Oh, he goes to fight in Scotland. That's right. The Old Alliance. He goes to fight with France and Scotland, trying to attack the English from the north. And while he's gone, he leaves Marguerite in charge of the lands. And we'll get to what she does in a little while. But basically he goes off to fight, gets more scarring and dirtier, and comes back, and for his heroics, he is knighted in the field for his actions during the battle, which is cool. That's finally, you know, a little recognition for his service, even though, like, when the people who were knighted before him got knighted, everyone cheered, and when he got knighted, everyone was just like, So, like, he, like, nobody likes this guy, and it seems like there's a very good reason why.
He's no fun, you know?
Yeah, off-putting, to say the least. Yeah, so when you come back, he's like, okay, I'm safe. He hugs his wife, you know, it's fine. But he's like, look, I got to go to Paris to collect my money from
the king,
from
presumably. Yeah, like...
Yeah, from fighting, presumably. And I'll only be gone for a week. And when I get back, you know, we'll get everything together. And then he leaves. He tells his mom not to abandon Marguerite and not to take everyone out of the castle. And his mom does it anyway because she really fucking doesn't like Marguerite.
Yeah, because she's just a bitch, you know? What are you going to say?
Yeah, she didn't have any of it. And they leave. While Jean de Carouge is gone, they leave. The mom leaves and takes everyone out. And then the next thing we see is Jean arriving back, and his wife is acting strangely, and eventually says that she was raped by Jacques Legris while they were gone, and then it immediately fades to black, and we go to the second segment, which is, you know, Adam Driver's Jacques Legris. But basically, in between, on that one day that they happened to be gone, Adam Driver showed up and raped Marguerite. That is her claim, and that's what we know of it as the second segment begins. So the second segment is, yeah, as I said, the truth of Legris, and it starts out and it shows the Battle of Limoges again, but it shows it more from Legris' perspective, and he's like, when it showed it originally, Damon yelled "for the king," and they all rode off together, and everybody's like, "for the king," and they all go fight. Well, in this telling of it, Legris, like, Matt Damon's the only one who goes forward. He's just like, "Yeah, for vengeance," and then, like, Legris is like, "We have to help him," and there's some disagreement, but Legris not going to let his buddy die, so he's like, "Look, we're going." They go. They
Adam yells for the king.
Yeah, Adam yells for the king, and yeah, you get, and so the thing about Legris' whole story is, like, it's telling of the relationship of him and Affleck's Pierre, and it's just like the first segment is like a war movie that you would think Ridley Scott would normally do, except without quite so much of the bombast or, like, explicit historical inaccuracies. And the second one is like an intimate portrait of a medieval bureaucrat, almost. And it's just like, I'm just impressed by the film. I'm sorry.
So in here there were some touches that I want to shout out particularly. So, you know, there's this banquet scene at Pierre's where his wife goes to bed, and then they start reading De Amore.
Yes.
And I was like, ah! It's like, you know, fucking De Amore mentioned, you know, like, woo! And they're reading the rules of love, and I was, like, laughing about that because I thought it was quite funny. Because it's actually, I thought it was useful to set up the fact that, you know, extramarital affairs are not out of the ordinary. You're not supposed to do it, but, you know, they're not out of the ordinary. And I thought it was a really nice way of setting it up. But I also thought it was quite funny how they're like, "Oh, he reads Latin." I'm like, yeah, no, fuck, he reads. Everybody reads Latin. So it's like, it would be like, I was kind of considering that it's like, if you were doing character builds on a video game or something, it's like Damon and, so like Jean and, sorry, I should say their names. Jean and Jacques would be like polar opposites. right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, Jacques got all of the thinking abilities and all these things, and, Jean's got none of them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
the truth is usually somewhere more in the middle, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then when they're like, oh, well, how'd you learn to read Latin? He's like, oh, well, I was going to be in the church, but I've, like, worked my way up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
like, that's, again, not unreasonable. But
Yeah. Yeah.
what is funny is this idea that, like, oh my god, he reads Latin. It's like, dude, it is so normal to read Latin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's called
So,
reading, bro. Like,
yeah, so normal for like everyone. Like the fact that like that like one like French like quasi aristo wouldn't know how to read Latin is very funny to me. But like at the same time, I guess like it goes a long way to show like Legree was born basically impoverished, and he was in the church for a while, and that's how like he that is like a means, although not a common one, of like raising above your station to some degree. Yeah,
because
I like that they gave him like a good backstory about that.
yeah, it's like, you could in theory go to the church at any moment and learn how to read and write, and you can make your way up that way. So I thought that was really good. And I also, although, like, let me just say one thing that happens in here, because that they're also establishing how fun he is, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's like the party boy, and then I'm like, the shirtless wrestling orgy,
Yeah,
like, probably not. I was like, well, I mean, like,
but you get two choices. You can either have the church oppresses all sex and has since the Middle Ages, or shirtless wrestling orgy. You can have
like, and actually, do you know what? Like, I can't say that there weren't shirtless wrestling orgies. I can't, but I'm just like, huh. I'm confronted.
Yeah.
Like, Ridley Scott got my ass because he can't be like, were you there? And I was like, it feels wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But like, maybe I'm wrong here. So I was like,
no,
I was like, on the whole, I guess I'm gonna
I'm...
take the shirtless wrestling orgy. But my gut reaction was like, homie, no.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. Like it's it seems unlikely based on everything we know that huge orgies were happening all the time, but we know people were like sleeping around and everything. So it's just kind of like, when I saw it, I was like, I literally thought it's probably not accurate, but I get what you're going for here, Ridley, because he's just like, he's showing that like not only are they sleeping around, like it's just like
it's a frat boy court
thing for
it's
them.
a frat boy court, right? Yeah. And I think that actually he does a good job here of showing that, like, really playing it to kind of like the frat boy angle, where it's like, oh yeah, well, he knows how to read and all this stuff, and he's using his powers for evil, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we get more like background on De Carouge and why Pierre doesn't like him, and Pierre's reasons for not liking him seem pretty valid. He doesn't ever pay his stuff on time. He doesn't get any of his rents from his peasants. We don't get any, grain or whatever they're supposed to give. We don't get any of that. And he's like humorless and dour, and no one likes him except for Legree, basically. And, Legree is like, look, I understand, but he's my friend, blah, blah, blah. And, Pierre gives them the disputed piece of land anyway. We see like from the other side about how they're getting sued and they're going to the king. And, there's the whole like, we see what happened when Carouge went to confront Pierre and Legree about this whole thing, and like he did so in front of like their entire retinue and was like very discourteous to them, and things that would have besmirched the honor of both Pierre and Legree. And so and like as he's leaving, like De Carouge is getting literally laughed at by everyone there, like, and like kind of fumbles with his horse as he's getting on it, so they're laughing at him more, and it's just incredibly embarrassing. And and then a year later there's the Crespin's birthday or celebration, and Legree is like, look, I gotta bury the hatchet here because, as I said, the vassals shouldn't be fighting. It's gonna hurt the Lord. excuse me. And he goes, and it's the same kind of makeup thing, but then like he and Marguerite like have this flirtatious thing, and they kind of flirt, and it gets hot and heavy. They start speaking German to one another and talking about
the Ramonda the Rose and fucking
yes.
Percival, which also okay.
Yes,
look,
yes,
I got so wound up by this because
no.
I was like, oh, you guys didn't like the sex book and found it boring, but Percival, you really.
Yeah.
I'm like the Ridley. You got this bass backwards, right?
You got it bass backwards.
Like they should like the Ramonda Rose and be like,
Yeah.
Percival's so boring, because it's like for true flirting, it should be like, I like the one that's about courtly love and extramarital sex, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, whatever, Ridley. But Ridley's like, I've heard of 2 books. You know, like,
I literally wrote, Eleanor's going to have a problem
dude.
with this. No, you're right. Like, and when I say that, I'm not being like, oh, Eleanor's going to rain on our fun. It's just like,
I love having
there
a
was
brand.
something there. There was something there that like I knew was off. Like I obviously couldn't tell the specifics, but I was like, wait a minute, what is the thing? But like again, I did like how it showed like the intellectual heft of these people, and that people of this time, could make trenchant criticisms of art and things like that. I think again, it's showing the aspects of humanity that are central across the board. They flirt, and then later, I think according to like Legree's vision or his truth, she comes up to Marguerite comes up to his room later after everyone's asleep, sneaks in, they flirt. They're about to start kissing. It cuts to the next morning, and we see Adam Driver like asleep, shirtless in his bed, and he looks over like somebody should be there, and there's no one there. So I wanted your take. Do you think that they had, and if they did, I guess it would have been consensual at this point. Do you think they had sex at this point?
I think it was a dream.
Interesting. I did. I thought it was real at first.
So did I.
And then when it didn't show up, in hers, I was like, So you had a wet dream, didn't you, buddy?
Yeah. So okay, like when I thought that it was happening at first, and I literally said out loud, "No." Because it would be so dangerous.
Yes.
Like it would be so
yes.
dangerous for a woman to like, and also, how is she getting away from Jean?
Yes, yeah.
And then
because the whole thing about Jean is he is incredibly jealous and protective.
Yeah, so like how would she get out of that room? And then I also think because of what we see later in terms of the actual trial, Ridley Scott is kind of setting up this juxtaposition.
Yes.
Right, so
yes.
it's like,
and
well, who's dreaming about this?
Yeah, and I think I'm not totally sure, but I think if that was real, it would have been played differently, and it would have been played in like the much more awful misogynist way that I feared it was going to be played, which is like, well, they had sex, so like they couldn't be raped the second time, but it doesn't do that. And like, I'm not saying it can't be true that they had sex, but based on everything else, it doesn't seem like it is, and it does seem like a dream, because we don't like. There's no other confirmation anywhere that like that actually happened. So yeah, we've got the dream, we've got the whole thing. Later we find out that Jean de Carouge is going off to as you said, fight in Scotland, and Jacques Legree is he can't stop thinking about Marguerite. He's developed this idea in his mind that like they're in love, and it is going to be it's going to be the ideal of chivalry. He's going to show up, and they're she's going to jerk him off or whatever, and then it's going to be fine. So they show up at the castle. There is a whole
they like trick their way inside.
Yeah, they trick their way inside. Okay, so Eleanor, if you wouldn't mind describing what happens here, because like I want to know your thoughts. Well, go ahead if you describe it, and then I have a question.
So yeah, the mother-in-law is out. She's taken everyone in the castle, which odd. Let me just say, like, that's, you know, you wouldn't take an entire household of staff. It's weird.
They basically needed to clear the castle so the conceit of this film.
Exactly. Yeah. So the castle is clear. And then like the skeevy sidekick of Jacques, goes and is all like, oh, my horse threw a shoe. Can I come in and warm myself? He comes in, gets followed by Jacques, and Jacques is like, haha, 'tis I love you. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm married, you need to leave. And so Jacques is like, yeah, you need to leave, to his friend.
Yeah. So, like, is this right here, like, would this have been, like, considered, like, if not courtly action that would have actually happened, would this have been considered, like, in the vein of like the chivalric tales that they've been hearing? What Driver is doing right here.
So what's interesting is sort of yes and no. Okay.
Interesting.
Because the getting in, you got to get in somehow, right? And it'll often be to a room, though. That's the thing, right? It's never to like a whole ass castle. It's like getting into a room somehow, and that kind of thing. And that's usually achieved by just straight up breaking in.
Yeah.
And then being like, hey, I'm here, I know you were waiting for me, or whatever. So this is maybe a bit more quote-unquote realistic, because it's like, you know, it's going to require some subterfuge to get in. And what I find interesting is that Jacques is just like, yeah, and that's what I have to do. Because, like, how else are we going to do this? And, like, this is kind of completely normal. And then that is where then the sexual assault takes place. And I found this very interesting because, like, you know, granted, this is like one of these, like, I think this is one of these woman things, because even in Adam Driver's / Jacques' more romanticized view, I'm like, yes, that's a rape. You're raping that. Like, even when, like, in his view of it, I'm like, still doesn't look like she's having fun, right? But it's very interesting because later, when he's asked about it by Pierre, he's like, well, yeah, she said no a lot, but that's just what you have to say.
Yes. That exact quote is what I wanted to ask you about, because I remember you've talked about, like, and I'm, please, for the love of God, know that I'm not blaming
no.
this happens to or anything, but, like, I remember you saying something about how the woman has to be like, well, no, I could never do that, you know, and like,
so there's a whole fucking thing about this in De Amore, right? So one of the rules of love, which they don't talk about, which they don't mention, but one of the rules of love is that a love easily attained is, like, worth less. Right?
Yes.
So one of the things that you're supposed to be doing with courtly love is like, no, like, especially if you're the woman, like, you have to be essentially inspiring chase on the part of the man, because otherwise you're a slut, and why would he love you? And so that's why I wrote this down. I was like, well, actually, this does conform to courtly love tropes. You know, that you do have to kind of protest to a certain extent. Granted, that's supposed to be like beforehand.
Okay.
It's supposed to be like, no, sense, sir, don't. Oh, why are you sending me so many love letters? Oh, did you send me a code?
Oh, no, not like when you're holding her down on the bed.
But it's kind of a logical extension of that. And so I thought that dramatically this works really well. And indeed, I would venture to say that I believe that in the heart of hearts of many people who have raped people, this is how it's gone down.
Yes.
Like, where I just think that many, I do not believe that the vast majority of people who do sexual assaults think they have. Which doesn't mean that they haven't. I want to make that abundantly clear. And that
and doesn't mean that there shouldn't be punishment.
They should still, and they should get in trouble. You know? And you're a dick. But I think that this is the story guys tell themselves.
Yes, 100%.
Or whoever. You know, because granted, obviously anyone can sexually assault anyone. But you know, the story that they tell themselves is no. This was actually wanted. And even if there is like no no no, it's like no no no, yes yes yes, you know, kind
Yeah.
of deal. um
Yeah.
I
And
don't think
yeah,
people
go ahead.
set out for the most part to commit sexual assault. I mean, there are egregious cases of it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that that's the major way that it's played, which is why, for example, like, oh, I'm going to do my boyfriend's bit. Let's steal his job. Which is why, consent education is really important, because it actually isn't about telling people off for sexually assaulting people, because people know not to sexually assault people, right? They're like, most people are not out there being like, I can't wait to sexually assault someone. But what they aren't good at is actually establishing what a consensual, like, anything might look like any. And the trouble with medieval society is it is non-consensual, right? You've got like a
Yes.
woman who's
Yeah.
locked in a castle, and her husband's like, you can't go out. She's constantly monitored, and so there is no way really to ascertain what is or is not consent here, because consent is an ongoing process that like involves everything from making coffee to sex,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
I think I was like, oh god, like it was horrible and very difficult to watch, but really good in terms of the point that
Yeah.
it was making. I thought, where I was like,
Yeah.
damn, I like the use of historical documentation here, and I thought that was really well played. Yeah, yeah.
I was, and I, the way that I want to say this, I don't want it to sound weird or perverse, but one of the ways that I knew that Scott was really on his game here and was doing something different is the way that Marguerite says no in Jacques' truth, and the way that she says no in her truth, because in her truth the no's are hysterical sobbing, no no no, do not do this, please, for like, just like, it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, right now I'm getting goosebumps because
Yeah,
like,
it was difficult to watch. Yeah, yeah.
it's very difficult to watch. But in his version, her no's are more like, no, no, no. Like, it's like she's saying no, but like the no's are like, the tone of them is slightly different, so you could like,
Yeah,
infer
they're like
it differently.
flat.
And yes, yeah, okay, yes, thank you. They're not. She's not like no and then moaning. You know, it's like she's like no.
And
No,
it's just, yeah, it's
please,
really
no.
just like flat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a good way to
it's
put it.
neither like leaning into it like no, like,
Yeah, like, oh no, stop it! I could
Mm.
never. Oh,
but
yeah.
it's also not like crying.
Yeah, and like, I think it is, like, I think that if he was doing a worse job of this, like, you know, her nose would have been like, no, oh no,
Oh, yeah.
oh no, and then it just turns into moaning, and then you go from there. But it's not. It's like, he chases her around the table, which is
What he'd been doing before.
a callback to the orgy scene where he chases a woman who is at that point consenting around the table. But he does that, and then he bends over the bed and has sex, forcibly has sex with her from behind. And I guess they don't really say this, but I guess it wasn't anal, because there is a question of the
baby, yeah.
parentage of her child. So yeah,
That's very
what
naughty
happens.
sex. You're not supposed to be having.
Yes.
You're not supposed to be having sex from behind. Medievally,
yeah,
so
and yeah, that makes you animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, the rest of Legree's truth is he hears about he and Pierre have a talk. He hears about the reports, and Legree's freaking out, but Pierre's like, look, if he files a complaint, I'm the judge. I get to say what happens, and everything, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And then you find out that no, actually, he has
gone above his head.
Decarouge has gone what now?
Gone above his head. He's taken it straight
he's
to
gone
the
above
top.
his head, straight to the top. He's gone to the King of France to argue for this duel, and the last thing we see from Legree's truth is that he accepts the duel. He picks up the the glove that's been laid down, you know, this breach of his honor will not stand, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, that's where we are. And then the last
Oh, wait,
one
I've got to stop us because there's two important correct points here. Which is, I liked this scene where the clergy guy was like, you should take this to a clerical court.
And
being like, don't do this, take it to the clerical court. You're technically a member of the lower clergy, so we can let you off. And I'm like, that's literally why they existed. Yes.
I remember, I remember when I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember Eleanor talking.
So and that's interesting too, because what it's kind of doing, I don't know, maybe Ridley Scott knows this, maybe it doesn't, is implying that that Jacques went to university. And so that's why he's a member of the lower orders. And, you know, it also would explain why he still kind of is, technically, and hasn't had to put it all aside. And so that was really good. And also, the guy there makes the point that rape is a property dispute.
Yes.
And which is really important because that is true in a medieval standpoint. He hasn't injured Marguerite. He has injured Jean. And that is correct. That is 100% correct. Where it's like, you basically took hold of someone else's property, and that's the problem. Yep. And it's fucked up and gross and disgusting, and also correct historically. Yes. So well done to Ridley on that one.
Yeah. And then we get to the last segment, which is the truth according to Marguerite de Carouge.
Okay, so I have a question for you here. Yes. Okay, so on every scene before, when it was like the truth according to Jean de Carouge, the truth according to Jacques de Gris, and then it would just fade out. But on this one, it was like the truth according to Marguerite de Carouge, and then the Marguerite de Carouge bit faded out, and it just said the truth.
Yeah.
Did I hallucinate that?
Noticed
Okay.
No, you did not. And the reason I noticed it, oddly, is because I had to pause it because I had to go do something. I had to go do something while I was watching it, so I paused it and I came back and I was like, "Why does it just say the truth?"
Yeah, so I think that this is like Ridley shouting out, being like, "By the way, that she is the ultimate arbiter here." And I think what it also does is kind of offer a middle path to both of what the men are thinking, but also it's like, hey, remember how she's a person? Cool. Anyway, go ahead.
No. It did that, and it's interesting that she said that because, like I said, I came back. It's like, why does it just say the truth? Because none of them faded out.
Yeah, hers was the only one.
Straight to black.
Yeah. And also, I bring it up too because I was Googling afterwards, like trying to get things done because I was Googling. Is the date of her death, like from the battle, correct at the end? And the first thing that came up was online when I said, did the wife from the Last Duel, and the first thing that comes up on Google is lie. The autocorrect is lie. So in our current culture, even if Ridley Scott is like, no, with that, we still live in a culture that's like, oh, but that bitch was lying.
She did lie during the trial once, but we'll get there. It's not about anything substantial.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's about how sex with Jean is not good. But that's beside the point. So the truth, according to Marguerite, it starts with the public reading of the dowry, and once again, Jean is boorish, and he's like, no, what about this disputed piece of land, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole thing about it. They go through, they get married, and the sex is not great. She does not look like she's having a good time with it, even though Jean definitely gets off, but she does not. Fast forward to the party, the celebration at Crespin's, and we see it from her point of view, which is she's talking to like these other ladies who are her friends, and they are like, I would let Jacques Legris run through my field any day. They're doing body talk, but
Full.
It does. It's like, like one of them's like, I could never be with him. My husband would kill me, and the other one's like, well, yeah, at least you die happy though, or something. She's just like, woo, yeah. And Marguerite mentions like, well, despite the fact that he is incredibly handsome.
He's a real piece of shit. Like,
he's a real piece of shit. Like, I've heard all the rumors, like, in his Legree's philandering. Well, it's not philandering because he's not married, but his his predilection with court women is well known, even to Marguerite de Carouge, who's forced to stay locked up in her castle thanks to her husband. And then they have the talk. There's lots of giggling, and then it jumps forward. We clearly do not see the scene where they had sex, and since it's not shown here,
I just that this homie was dreaming.
Yeah, I think he was dreaming. I
believe him to be dreaming, because we would have to at least see Marguerite leave her chambers and go do that.
Yes. If it showed her, like, if there was anything from that night that showed her, like, sneaking out a window like that, sure, fine. But there isn't, and it just, like, it immediately jumps forward to, like, her relationship with Jean and trying to, like, soften him and make him understand. Like, look, we came here. We came to this party, and, like, you had been on the outs for a year. You weren't welcome at court, blah, blah, blah. And we come here, and we're all nice, and we smile and shake hands, and it's better. And John is like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Maybe you aren't just some dumb woman who doesn't know anything. I mean, this woman could think. What are we talking about? Yeah, I don't know why he turned into, like, a Long Island guy, but you get the idea. And then, like, oh, man. You see, like, back at the homestead, there's, like, this prize white mare that he has. God. And a stallion who is, like, just...
Saw the whole horse boner.
Yeah, fucking raring to go, rolls up and just fucks the shit out of the mare, like, before anyone can stop it.
And they beat, like, the mare about it.
Yeah, and, like, he's, like, trying to use, like, this... It's not a bat, but it's, like, some kind of, like, big instrument to, like, bat the stallion off, and he's just not having any of it, and the mare gets fucked and blah blah blah.
Foreshadowing.
But yeah, exactly, foreshadowing. But then we fast forward, and Jean leaves.
I liked this montage.
Yes.
Jean leaves montage, and this bitch whips the estate into shape.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, we do see more not great sex again that I think would probably qualify as marital rape or something close to it, because she was not into it. And he's like, hey, do your duty. Lay back and think of Normandy.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever the fuck it is, yeah. And then there's, like, there are these mounting questions about, like, why aren't you pregnant yet? Because he got his previous wife pregnant, and they had a kid, and now, Marguerite doesn't have one.
They do, and they get this right with the physician and everything. It's like, well, you are coming, right? Because
he's like, yeah, you can't conceive if you don't also achieve. They keep calling it, is it the little death?
Which is like, which is like a French thing, way of saying orgasm. So I think we're trying to be French with it. Even though half these motherfuckers have American accents, which is fine, by the way.
Yeah.
What weirds me out is, like, at the very beginning, Adam Driver sounded like Matt Berry out here. He's all like, New York City. and then it, like, wears off.
Yeah, Ridley was like, nah, man, it's fine.
Just don't,
like,
you don't need to do that.
Just do like, the haughty, like, American
you
thing. You'll be fine.
You really don't have to sound like Matt Berry.
No,
anyway.
It's, that is true. It's very funny. And you get this whole, like, there is one thing I wanted to mention. There is gossip about the Queen having pierced nipples. The Queen of France having pierced nipples. I loved this. Which I just thought was hilarious. Like, even if, women back then did or didn't have pierced nipples, I don't know. But, like, it just seems like something, like a rumor that people, like, oh, did you hear
that's
she
cute,
has
right?
pierced nipples? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, she wears ankle socks. She lets others see her. Yeah, you get that.
I love it.
Yeah. We get the whole talk with the physician about, black bile, humors are in balance, make sure you're coming when he comes, like, literally all the stuff that Eleanor has said on all the sex episodes we've done about, like, you just, you have to come, he has to come, like, this is supposed to be pleasurable for both of you, like, like, Ridley Scott's really like, hey, this Jean guy is not getting
Yes. This guy sucks in the sack.
Yeah, and then like it gets down to it, Jean returns from Scotland and he's mad at Marguerite
For being hot wearing a hot dress.
Yeah, because she's wearing a dress that's so low cut, and it's like, dude, you come back and you get to see your wife's tits, and
haven't you missed your wife's tits?
Dumb as fuck.
I can't. Like, he's so stupid.
He's so dumb, and so like while Jean is gone, like there's this whole like. As Eleanor said, like there's a montage, and it's like, got to get the fields back to plowing. Got to get let the mare run free while the baby horse is developing, because that's better. The peasants show up and start paying because she told them to show up, and they've never been paying before because Jean is
an idiot,
too dumb to do it. And you get this whole thing. Anyway, Jean comes back. Things are really bad because
she had a cute dress.
Jean's mom. Yeah, she had a cute dress. Jean's mom is like fucking furious, and they're sniping back and forth. And Jean's like, "Will you two shut the fuck up? Oh my god, I have to go to Paris. Please don't leave my wife unattended in the castle here all alone, Mom."
She does.
And then and then like the next day, Mom's like, yeah, cool. And the next day she just takes everyone out. And then you get the
scene,
the event between her and Adam Driver, and if it wasn't clear, I mean, it should have been clear the first time around, but if it wasn't clear that it was rape, then it is definitely 100% clear now from her perspective, from the truth, at least according to that title card. She's like, no, please, for the love of God, no. She screams for like one of her attendants a few times to get it, like, to get help, and nobody comes, and she's wailing and crying.
And then like there's the scene afterwards where she's like bathing and she's got like bruises all over her, and so
and everybody comes back and they're like, is something wrong? And she's like,
seems like you're crying during a conversation about cheese. Anything the matter?
Yeah, and she's like, no, I'm fine. She, she has her breakdowns, obviously. And then when Jean comes back, she's nervous about telling Jean because Legree is like, don't tell your husband, he may kill you. And so in Jean's version of this, she tells him she's been raped, and he's like, okay, we'll do whatever, we'll do whatever we have to do or whatever. But in this version, when she tells him, like, he basically, he starts choking her. Like De Carouge picks her up by the throat, and he's like, are you lying to me? Are you lying? Did you let him have his way with you? Blah, blah, like, picks her up, chokes her for a minute, the whole thing. Like, very just, like,
bad.
Very disturbing, very awful. Like, just, he's screaming about it. He's furious. And then when he finally accepts the truth of it, and this is what I was talking about earlier, he's like, this is, how could Legree do this to me?
Yeah.
And Marguerite is like, what the fuck do you mean to you? I'm the one that got raped, you piece of shit. And then, as if to further drive home the point that Jean is also awful, he then, in order to, like, I guess, confirm, like, that he believes her or something, forces her into bed so he can fuck her, because he doesn't want Legree to be the last one who knew her. And if the other one wasn't marital rape, this one definitely is. Beyond a shadow. And and it's just like, after that, it's like, we'll get to the trial in a second, but like her friend, like,
dobs her in, essentially.
Basically everybody, like, abandons her. Her friend, like, tells the court that, like, she said that Jacques Legree was handsome and everything like that, which she did, but it's like, but like at this point it turns from like a, like, okay, like, we're going to do this duel. And now it turns into a legal procedural about a rape trial in the Middle Ages, in which like we see both, we see that our system has not really gone that far away from their system, because like she is basically, told like,
are you sure you didn't want it? You said it.
Are you sure you didn't want it? Are you sure about this?
You're pregnant now, so are you sure that you didn't like it and get knocked up by him?
Yeah, Jean's mom is like, look, and I mean, this is awful too, because it puts her in perspective, a lot more in perspective. And she's like, look, I was raped too. And she's like, why didn't you say anything? And she's like, because do you see what's happening to you? Like, our entire family could be destroyed because of this. You just like, you don't make the waves. And like, even towards the end, like after the trial and after the king has decided that they're going to that the duel is going to happen, she has the baby, and she's like, even now as I see the baby, like, I don't know that I would have gone through this again, because the thought of losing it is worse than I can bear. And like, she fully regrets having done this. But
and also it becomes clear, just at this point, that if they have the duel and Jean loses, she's going to be burnt at the stake.
Yeah, she's going to be burnt at the stake. And it's very clear here that Jean did not tell her that part. She was like, look, if you two, like, if I bring this forward, you two are going to have a duel and fight to the death. And like, if you die, that sucks, but like, whatever. But it's like, no, if you die, or if he fails, you will be burned at the stake, and your child will be given over into custody of the church or whatever, blah, like, and it's like, and she's like, you didn't tell me any of that. She's very furious at Jean, the whole thing. It's, and so there's this whole trial before the king, and they go through all this stuff. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the trial, because it's very much like they get into all of her private details, all of her, like you said, he was cute once kind of thing. Like, you're pregnant now, so you must have liked, because obviously you can't get pregnant if you don't like it. And so since you're pregnant now, it wasn't a rape because you liked,
So this is really tricky, because basically you almost don't have rape trials in the Middle Ages. Like, usually it's settled as kind of like a private dispute or a property dispute between individuals. And, the idea of cross-examination or something like that would be incredibly difficult. But I would say that it probably would not happen that you would put a noblewoman on the stand like this and ask about her sex life in front of a mixed group. Like, you would probably do that perhaps in front of, like, there wouldn't be other people watching. If you did do it.
Do it like essentially what we would call in
chambers.
Chambers.
Exactly. You do it in chambers or something like that. And you'd probably have like a lot of clergy members there as well, or things like that. But this bit is a little anachronistic, because like you wouldn't have a trial. Like you just wouldn't do it. Because you've already established there's a he said, she said. There's not going to be a cross-examination. And if you're already going to something as wild as like, there's the possibility if there's going to be this duel, then this probably wouldn't happen. So that bit's really anachronistic. You just don't have a concept like this. Like it's a property dispute. They would put the men on trial. They wouldn't really ask her, and if they did ask her, they wouldn't do it in a room. Because don't get me wrong, like they're misogynist as fuck, but it's in a different way. It's much more paternalistic, right? And it would certainly be heavily implied that she was a big slut, but like you wouldn't ask a woman if she enjoyed sex with her husband in front of a mixed group of people, for example. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know. I figured there's probably.
But I thought it was a good point to make.
Oh, yeah, it is.
This is one of my examples of like what art is good and useful for, right? It's like, is this historically accurate? No, but I think it's a good and useful bit of art. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like it takes a lot of the stuff that you would see with like someone with someone who accused someone of rape in the Middle Ages. It's a good example of like all the questions and stuff that would be flying back and forth but instead of it happening like in confession or like just before the clergy or just before the king or something like that, they have it like this, both so it can increase the drama, but also it can be more legible to like modern Western audiences who are like, well, if there's going to be a trial, there has to be, like any cross-examination, and the cross-examination in front of just the king is much more boring and less dramatic than her like being forced to sob because she finds out she could be burned at the stake during the cross-examination of the trial. And it's just the whole thing. And the king here is played, I forget the guy's name.
Very well. I loved this.
He is such a little shit ass Lord Fauntleroy motherfucker who's just like clapping like a little like boy in his dainty school outfit because he got a big lolly, and he's like, "Ooh, there's going to be a duel!"
I know.
And like there's like some lines earlier about how there hasn't been like a duel to the death like this in years or whatever, and I don't know if that's true, but it plays really well for the king. But interestingly, the king here also shows up in Andor, where he plays like Space Trotsky. We will get to that, but it's very very
comrade.
different.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but yeah, he's great. The whole thing, like all the performances are phenomenal. Like I can't say enough about like how brooding and shitty Adam Driver is, and how just like meat-headed and asshole-ish Jean de Caroux. Like it, and Jodie Krumer does so much with this in something that could be a poorly done or be a thankless role, but she does it so well, and it's written so well that it's not.
And I think I really like, there's no point in going through the duel. It's a great Ridley Scott duel. I'm sad about Horsey's getting hurt, etc. But the duel itself, it's worth watching it just for the duel because that's really fun. Although the use of weaponry is odd, but like this is like small nerdy points. But one of the things that I really like that they do within it is it's also like Jacques' character, his whole thing is like, oh, but we're in love. This is that we were in love the whole time. I love her, and it's like, oh, but you'll let her get burned at the stake. Like both of them will let her get burned at the stake. Like it's like both of them are like, oh no, because I love her so much. It's like, but you're both willing to let her fucking die, like for your sense of honor and. That's really interesting. And so I guess sort of the last point that I wanted to make, other than that this is a good movie and I do recommend it, is one of the things we have to keep in mind with this and how like it's based on a true event. This is a true event. This duel did take place. However, the great majority of sources that we have about it are literary. Okay, so it's like... it is like legendary in France, and it's something that's been written about and written about and written about. So this duel did take place. But certain things, like, for example, that you would be burnt at the stake if, it turns out this is, like, that is not an ordinary judicial procedure.
And it was interesting that they jumped it to that, because earlier they were talking about how false accusations before the king could result in you being hanged. And I was like, okay. And then they're like, burn at the stake. I'm like, whoa,
and it's like,
whoa.
So to me, and like one of the criticisms of the book in English that this is kind of based on, and which like, I don't know, people online like to come and fight with me about this because I said that it wasn't particularly historically accurate. They're like, oh, but the book, and I'm like, but it's a literary book. It's by a literary historian who does literary things about a literary genre. Like, and that doesn't mean that this is what happened. This is about how we tell the story, and that's what's important. And so the point, both in the literary transmission of this and in the movie, is what the stakes are. Right? So it's a way of showing how certain she is about her innocence that she would do this. And kind of like underlining the fact. So I just wanted to get that bit in about how like these are literary conceits that are being taken to a logical level, I would say, by Ridley Scott. But then it's too far for Ridley Scott to be like based on true events. I'm like, that part's it's a literary convention.
It's the duel is great. You should check it out. There are like banners fluttering in the wind. It's like a snowy morning. The sun is just barely peeking through like gray snow clouds, and it's like shot on location in, I think that was either in Wales or France, but It's just
Beautiful, yeah.
it's done so well. It's gory, it's violent. The whole thing is very satisfying. Adam Driver, like, to the very end, like, is given a chance to, like, repent, and he's like, no, I did it, it was love. He believes,
I think he does, yeah.
he 100% believes this is love, 100% believes, like, what he did was, like, the chivalric, like, ideal, and that, like, you know, he didn't do anything wrong. And again, you know, if this movie or the ending was handled differently, you'd just be like, wow, like, you know, you're just making this shitty guy be like, no, I'm still right, it doesn't matter. But, like, in the end, like, Jean wins. He gets the kill. He and Marguerite are allowed to go free. Like, she's taken down off the scaffolding. They ride horses through the streets of Paris, where all these people are, like, cheering and yelling, and it's great. And, like, at the end, it's very clear that, like, she is just so relieved that she's not going to die. All she wants to do is go home and see her kid and get away from all this. But Jean is like, this is his moment. He has finally got the respect of people, and that is what he wanted. It's not about his wife being free or anything like that. He's riding the horse way in front of her, like, in front of the outlines or the building that's going to be Notre Dame. And, like, it's just this whole thing, and that is his moment. And it's just like, you know, you could tell that, like, even in victory, like, she's still stuck with this shithead. And then there's like a, you know, a brief title card, and it's like, Jean died a few years later during the Crusades. Yay. Marguerite continued living, ran his estates well, and lived a good life. And the last thing you see is Marguerite's, and never remarried. That's like, key. Yeah, it's like, yeah, no wonder she had a bad deal with it. And you see, and the kid at the end has blonde hair, implying that it is Jean's kid, not Legree's kid, you know, because Legree has Adam Driver's thick, dark head of hair. And yeah, and so, you know, like, I gotta be honest, like, the fact that this ends on, like, the Game of Thrones school of Punnett squares and, like, how genetic traits, but to, like, show you that, like, that is her kid by Jean, and, you know, like, you know, she was right. Yeah. Like, her from all perspectives, she was right. God said she was right because of the
duel,
and Jean won. Science and medicine say she's right because the kid came out and the kid had blonde hair, and that means it's Jean, and she didn't, you know, quote unquote, enjoy the rape, and therefore it would be Legree's kid. And it's just like, if this movie had gone to any lesser lengths to show you that A, she is the disadvantaged party here and things are awful for her, or B, that she was like, or didn't even just keep ramming home this point, like, you could be like, oh, this movie is, like, endorsing, like, rape culture, and you know, and Ridley Scott is just like a tone deaf, like, old asshole, which, I mean, he probably is, but not in this one case. Respect, he did all right, at least not. And it's just like, you get this thing, and it's like it's a medieval soap opera about how a rape destroys people and families and lands and communities, and how, like, even when you're completely right, you're still getting put through the ringer, and, like, how awful rape accusations are for women to bring. Like, not just that, like, you should do it because because you get justice or whatever. It's like, justice is a secondary concern. Can you handle like the awful things that our terrible patriarchal societies, both then and now, are going to do to you?
Exactly. And I think that it is an incredibly important point. And you might think that like, it's belabored, or like, yeah, we all know that. But I'm like, well, but we don't all know that, because if you try to Google some information about this movie, people will still be like, but that bitch was lying though. Like,
and I said, Earlier I said she lied about one thing, and it was about that she
Sex with
enjoyed
her
having sex
husband.
with her husband.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
go
you're
ahead.
exactly right. Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear that like the one thing that she
Was
did
that-
lie about
that-
was actually no.
John's good in bed.
My husband actually sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lie.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that was a fucking lie.
Yeah. So I think it's a really successful piece of art.
Yes.
I enjoyed it. As much as one can, enjoy something that hinges on sexual assault. And I think that it actually makes some important points. So I do recommend it with the proviso that please just don't believe every single thing in it. But it's got some nice little touches, which I think are good. And overall, I thought I was going to go in as a hater and proved wrong. So good job, Ridley.
Yep.
High five.
Yeah. I like to be proved wrong about stuff. I enjoyed it. You should check it out. It's thought-provoking. It's very good. And while I do wish there were more bright colors in it, we do get to see a lot of like bare castle walls and stuff. That's fine, whatever. But
there's plates, there's doctors, there's bare castle walls. There are all these things that are a bit silly. One thing that's silly is that like the permanent tournament square that it's like made out of stone. I'm like, girl, no, but okay. But on the whole, using it as like a pastiche is good. I think.
Yeah, and I would say that it has those things, but like the detail on the armor and the production values on the clothes and like the sewing and everything, fantastic. I do not know if that armor is all period accurate. It might be pulling in later pieces or whatever.
I don't care because
matter.
It whips.
Matt Damon and Adam Driver look fucking fantastic in that. Like it's great. Yeah, it's good stuff. The whole thing looks good. You do get the shit covered peasants thing, but you also get like the peasant work staff like gossiping with like the noblewoman. So you can see that they have interiority. You don't get a lot of that obviously, but like it's there and it's there and you can compare it like we went on the Remember Shuffle podcast to talk about Robin Hood, and you can compare these two things and just the ways that they treat the same era of time, and they just completed. Robin Hood is just like, yeah, whatever, we'll just throw it together. Like none of this is nuanced. It went through like 30 treatments and was fucked up production and everything. And then you get The Last Duel, which was broken up by COVID. Like it had to have production stop like 3 or 4 times. And you get this thing that like outside of like a few, gray areas, it's like,
that's a nice piece of art.
It's good. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. Anyway, check it out. It's a lot of fun. I hope we did it justice. I hope you enjoyed it. I just I'm still shocked. I'm shocked by how well Ridley Scott, a 70-year-old British man, handles a rape story.
Good for him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was prove me wrong. I love to be proven wrong.
Exactly.
So,
Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me how you have this sensitive soul about understanding the nuances of not only rape but sexual assault and marital rape. It's just fantastic. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Next week we're going to be back. We're going to actually be doing an episode about the new Princess in the Tower info. Talk all about that. See what Eleanor thinks, because I am excited to hear about it and learn more. And then, as we said, we'll also be doing Andor. Our first episode on that will come out next week for patrons. But yeah, if you're in the U.S. or somewhere else that celebrates Thanksgiving this week, happy Thanksgiving. Yeah. Eleanor, you got anything this week?
Just the usual. I did write a blog post last week at going-medieval.com where I yell about how the church didn't kill Joan of Arc, because apparently that's a thing that a lot of Americans believe. I know. Yeah, it's really interesting.
I don't think I was ever taught that. I was like, no, the English killed her.
Correct.
It was always just that the English killed her, and they did it under the color of the thing, because she was loved by.
I saw some memes. I got mad. I wrote a thing, so that's there.
I don't know about that.
You can always check out my other very serious podcast, Gone Medieval, and I'm on the socials at Going Medieval. So yeah.
Yeah. Yep, Luke is amazing. You can find me on all the stuff. You know where I am. Check out my old show, People's History of the Old Republic, if you want to hear me and my old friend Kelsey ramble on about Star Wars. But yeah, again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. All right. Okay.